Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Thursday, November 18th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Michigan State game is in 2 days. The game against Michigan in 9 days. One of my favorite things about having Ross Fulton on the show is that when we talk about something, then a couple days later, it's like, ta-da, there it is happening on the field on Saturday. That was the case last week. We spent a bunch of time last week talking about Ohio State's struggles in the run game, how they used the wide receiver bubble screens to help get around that. And then, ta-da, the Buckeyes used that to great effect. Ross, first of all, thank you for making us look a little, making me at least look a little smarter than normal. And also, thank you for joining me.
Happy to be here, Tom, as always.
So, 2 weeks in a row, Penn State and Nebraska did more or less the same thing to try and clog things up for the Ohio State run game. We've talked about that the last couple of weeks. And so, unsurprisingly, Purdue basically tried to do the same thing. But in this case, it didn't work. So what did the Buckeyes to do to counter what those teams have been trying to do to them?
Yeah, I mean, Purdue really almost tried to supercharge it and like take it to an extreme. I think Ryan Day talked about after the game, they played cover zero, which, is a very aggressive. You have no deep safeties, lots of man coverage, things that you don't see all that much against Ohio State. And I think Saturday kind of showed why you don't. I'm guessing Purdue saw, Nebraska and Penn State, as we talked about, they were able to guess correctly by formation. And I think they're like, we'll take some chances. Maybe they were thinking Ohio State's going to want to come out and establish the run because people have been on them about running the football. And Ryan Day, I would say, took the opposite approach, which is, I think, correctly said, the problem with our run game is that people are overplaying our run game. And so instead of, running into sack boxes, they came out and they threw the ball quickly outside. So we talked about, a lot of wide receiver screens, reliefs. And the reason they're called reliefs is because CJ Stroud decides before the snap whether to pull it and throw it. And that's all just based on leverage. Or, is there the guy over the slot receiver, basically, is he too far deep or too far inside that you're just going to get free access yards? Those are easy plays, especially when you get to put the ball in the hands of Ohio State's 3 wide receivers. You get lots of yards. And essentially they just sort of, had Purdue's head spinning with that. And then that eventually Purdue no longer could keep just like giving up those yards. And so they got out of the box. They played more 2 deep safeties, more cover 4. And then that opened up run game opportunities.
That's kind of interesting because you always, growing up watching TV, it was like John Madden and Pat Summerall on TV telling me, well, you got to run the ball to set up the pass. This is like the opposite. You got to pass the ball to set up the run for Ohio State last week. That was kind of interesting. You actually had a great stat in your article. There were 9 RPO throws or reliefs. Stroud was 9 of 9 for 152 yards. Kind of explains why Purdue had to get out of it. Like, if you're giving up 100% passing at 17 yards a pass, that's probably not sustainable. That also set up one of the easiest throws that he made all day. One that let Jackson Smith and Jigba get wide open downfield for a touchdown. So can you explain how that worked? What set that up and how'd that work?
Yeah. And I mean, again, then we talked about against Nebraska too, that he had a really high percentage on those throws. He's decisive in doing that. He gets the ball out quickly. Obviously he has, again, receivers who are great after the catch. So then as you mentioned, they're throwing the bubble screen. And then, this is a play we've seen since Urban Meyer was here, but you basically fake the bubble screen. And then one of the guys who's acting like he's going to block releases vertically. And so, I think Ohio State did a nice job selling it because they basically set it up so that Jackson Smith and Jigba looked like he was going to go kind of to block out on the one wide receiver. And so it wasn't just like, hey, I'm faking straight ahead and then releasing. He was like, he literally kind of went out and then up on basically a wheel route to sell the concept. And obviously Purdue, again, was in cover 1. All 3 of those, the man defenders sat in the flat to play the bubble. If you're a defender and you keep getting killed on those plays, eventually you want to try to jump them. And that's, obviously the cat and mouse game. And there are things that probably future opponents may do to try to limit the bubble screens and, fake someone's coming down and then jump back out. But again, the more teams are worried about that, the more it opens up the run as well as those downfield opportunities.
Well, another thing that they did with Jackson Smith and Jigba to get him open was use orbit motion. That created a lot of space in the passing game. So can you explain what orbit motion is and why that worked on Saturday?
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think just to take it a step back, a lot of times people like to talk about with the Ohio State run game this year, at least, they're better in pistol versus they're better running from the shotgun or with, the halfback to the side of the quarterback. And each has its benefits. Like pistol, when the tailback's deep, it gets you going downhill, but it is harder to run reliefs or RPOs off of it because the quarterback has to turn his back, especially like on their wide zone play. And so, what they did on Saturday, what you can do out of the pistol again is like on those reliefs, because you're making the decision pre-snap, you can pull it right away. And you basically just, the quarterback abandons the run play essentially and throws. And so Jackson Smith, they put him on orbit return motion, really. So like orbit motion is you kind of go in a loop. You can think about like behind the quarterback all the way to the other side. And they faked that, and then he came back. And what that did is it helped for Stroud to identify what the coverage was going to do and create depth for him, because basically Purdue, because they were playing so much man coverage, when they saw the motion, they had to rock and roll their safeties is the term. So everyone has seen this action. Like if you, during a game, when the defensive back see the motion, the one will point to the other, then that deep safety will go down to become now the safety closer to the slot on the other side. And the guy who was on the slot will go back. So basically you're not just like chasing the motion, because then you're left sort of often chasing. So Purdue started to do that. That created a bunch of depth. And so it was an easy read for Stroud to throw it and pull it. So it's just a nice design when you're to protect your run game from the pistol as well, to say like, hey, defense, just because our tailback's deep doesn't mean that we can't use this to protect our run game.
So that was the orbit motion. Another thing that they used to open things up in the run game was jet motion. That's something we talked about last week. And, I think everyone kind of, if I say jet sweep, everyone kind of knows what that is. It's, the 10,000 handoffs Wisconsin has had to wide receivers over the last 10 years or so, just hand it off to the wide receiver as he's going past the quarterback. Ohio State had that, led to a big play for Garrett Wilson. So how did that help them target what Purdue was trying to do?
Yep. And a big play for Jackson Smith-Njigba too. So, and Wisconsin's frankly a good example, because again, the Wisconsin ran all those jet sweeps for the same reason Ohio State was, which if you're going to be a run game that doesn't run the quarterback, you need another way to hold the backside unblocked edge defender. And, particularly when it was George Karlaftis for Purdue, right? He's going to be aggressive. So you want to put him in conflict. You want to make him unsure of like, am I going to get down blocked? Am I going to have a split flow action? They brought in Mitch Rossi, a lot of to use him a lot of split blocking, because he's the best blocker of the tight ends. And then they just left him unblocked basically on those. And so they're essentially using his aggressiveness against him, where he's going to come down to play the run away from him. And, the wide receivers running, because all the offensive line is blocking away like it's a zone play. So he sees that, he plays his keys, and the ball goes past him. And so, the hope is, one, you obviously take advantage of the defense aggressiveness against them, but then you want, again, on the next play or the play after that, where you do run the ball, you want those guys on the backside to just be like a little bit more hesitant in playing the run than they were before, because they're now worried about that a potential jet sweep or something of that nature coming back to their side.
Now, in recent weeks, we've talked a lot about some of the issues on the Ohio State offensive lines, miscommunications, guys not getting to the second level, guys leaving unblocked defenders. Saturday, all 6 of Ohio State's offensive linemen, the 5 starters plus Matt Jones, all graded out as champions. So I'm going to guess that there was improvement there. What did you see that looked better? And, was it just like getting the communication issues straightened out from previous weeks? Why it was better, I guess. Why was it better?
Yeah. I mean, that was some of it. I mean, I think, I think there have to be, I mean, it's hard to quantify, but like between like the illnesses or the injuries and, as Day talked about earlier this week, like Nicholas Petit-Frere had like a death in the family, like that kind of stuff obviously impacts people. Right. And especially when you're moving positions around, they had to shuffle a bunch. So they were all in the same spot on Saturday. I think that they were helped in the game plan to get them comfortable in terms of, they used, I talked about in my article, like a bunch of mid-zone blocking schemes, which allowed them to be a little bit more vertical in their blocking, so they could take the double teams up to the second level while also kind of getting to the what I would call a bubble. So, a gap where there's not a defensive lineman is a bubble, essentially, where there's a linebackers responsible for it. And so teams have been kind of leaving that opposite the halfback open. So I think the scheme help them. And then I talked about, in pass protection, they use some 7-man full slide protection so that, they had every gap covered. They had a potential help against Karlaftis. I think that helped them build confidence. And, they just went back to playing like at the level that we expect them to. I mean, in some ways that was kind of like a 2-week blip caused by some of the identification issues. So, it wasn't like they couldn't perform at that level. It just like anything else. Once the ball got rolling, success begets success.
So obviously they had, they solved some of those problems that they had seen against Penn State and Nebraska. So they figured out ways around those against Purdue. What kind of a counterpunch should they expect from Michigan State this weekend? I mean, it seems like the Spartans may be vulnerable in the passing game, just looking at them, just watching some of their games and looking at some of the stats. What are you expecting Michigan State to try to do against Ohio State? Either in the run or the pass. Do you have an idea like what their response to the response might be this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Michigan State does have good players at all 3 levels. I mean, I think their defensive tackles are good. I think that'll pose a challenge, especially for Luke Whippler. Michigan State this year they're pretty aggressive. Their defense, scheme wise, isn't all that dissimilar to what Ohio State does. Like Mel Tucker is a Saban guy, but he doesn't necessarily run a Saban defense. But you'll get a lot of cover 3, a lot of hot pressures. As we talked about, where you get like they'll blitz 2 guys and play like 3 deep, 2 under, trying to outnumber the run game. And so, as you said, I think they've had issues in the back end. I think their game plan will have to be to try to put Ohio State behind schedule and try to, create negative plays, get some pressure on Stroud. Obviously Stroud, I mean, CJ, he's played very well, but like most quarterbacks, like when he's clean in the pocket, like teams have no chance. When you get some pressure on him, he can tend to he doesn't take sacks. He just gets it out really quickly. And so maybe you can get him to get out really quickly, rally to the ball, force a couple punts. And obviously, some of Michigan State's game plan is going to come down to possessing the ball themselves on offense and keeping Ohio State off the field. But yeah, I mean, I think you'll still see them try to create negative plays and get Ohio State off schedule because, once Ohio State gets rolling, as we said, it's pretty difficult to stop.
Yeah, that Purdue game was like a snowball rolling downhill in that first quarter, first half. That was an Ohio State team we hadn't seen in a little while, and I have a feeling Ohio State fans enjoyed that. So hopefully Ohio State fans enjoyed this as well. Ross, I know I always enjoy our chat, so thank you for joining me.
Yep, thanks, Tom. Happy to do it.
And you can find all of our great podcasts on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this one on: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, you name it. They're all there. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. You can also, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. Hit that bell. You'll get notified every time we post a new video. Makes all of our live shows, all of our podcasts, all that good stuff. It's all at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.